All right, so the next topic or next software that we're going to be looking at is the Resource Monitor. Now, those keen-eyed among you would have already seen that in the Task Manager screen that I have open. It is at the bottom left-hand corner. So that is one way that you can get to the open resource, or to open the Resource Monitor, is to click on that link. You can also get there by doing a search for Resource Monitor. There we go, pops right up once I get to the O on my computer. You can also run resmon.exe. All three of those options will get you to this exact location. And obviously, some things may vary based on your computer compared to mine. So when we first start off, probably the thing you most noticed the most recently is the graphs on the right-hand side. All right. So we have CPU, disk, network, and memory. And overall, we think about it, that kind of comes close back to Task Manager. We had CPU, disk usage, and memory. Here we have Ethernet and GPU as well. Again, look here, kind of the same thing. So kind of our four important graphs are being shown over here on the right. You will notice that the memory one is showing us the 100 thoughts per second, not necessarily our memory usage. So we do have disk usage, we do have network usage. Notice right now the scale though here is only 100 kilobits per second, not megabits per second. So pretty small on the long run. On the left-hand side, you now notice probably we have 5 different tabs across the top, and we have 4 different drop-down menus on the current overview tab. So we can go into our CPU. And if we quick look at this bar, it tells us our percent usage. It also tells us percent of our maximum frequency. And if you watch that number closely on my computer, there it goes, you'll notice that it actually goes over 100, which is kind of interesting. And this is one of those things that it's turbo boosting on Intel. I'm sure AMD has something, I don't know if it's called the same thing or not. But basically, your computer, the CPU that you have in your computer is rated for a specific frequency, and a lot of Intel chips will turbo or go above that as long as temperature and power requirements are met. It goes, yeah, I can feed you some more power and get you to go a little bit faster. So that's why you will see the maximum frequency above other items. 1 second. All right, so if we go ahead and expand the CPU tab, again, we have our image, we have our PID. Now, for those who do not know what PID is, that is our processor identification number. Every process is going to have its own unique PID. As you notice, I have some blue ones and then I have some black ones. The black ones are processes that are actively running, and the blue ones are the ones that are currently suspended, and you notice I do have it searched by that at this moment in time. We go ahead and look at my CPU usage. Again, OBS is kind of king of the roost here with roughly 3%, 3-4%. And again, if we look at Task Manager, OBS is rocking about 5% right now, 4. So right about where we're expecting. Everything's kind of matching up. Not exactly, but pretty close. If we go ahead down to our disk usage, again, you can see the same type of thing that's going on. Same with network and memory, kind of general stuff. If we go ahead to the CPU tab, again, you can see we have 4 different sections in here. We have our processes tab, which didn't actually change from the first one. I mean, going back and forth, you can see the only thing is changing is how big it is, since I'm sorting them the exact same way. But we have our processes. We already talked about PID. All right. Down here we have our services, which might be interesting to you. Now the associated handles and modules that we have, these windows down here, I'm going to go ahead and bring those up. You'll notice it says select a process or search handles to see results. And you're going, okay, let me click on this one to select it. Not working. All right, you have to actually use a little checkbox to the left to actually see what is going on in these two. Let me go ahead and shrink these so you can actually see them both at the same time. So if you don't have a checkbox selected, nothing is going to show up. All right. So we could go ahead and, you know what, let's look at Zoom. There we go. So we got our handles for Zoom, everything, image is zoom.exe. You can see the file paths and things like that. Here you can see the registry that for the handles, for the locations for things. So remember, handles are pointers that refer to system elements such as files, registry keys, events, or directories used by the select process. And the modules are helpful files or programs such as DLL files used by the process. All right, so that's what those two are, just as a quick little reminder. I think we talked about those in the last video. Across the top, you may not be able to see all of, everything. Like this last one is getting cut off a little bit. If you do just hover over it, it will tell you what it is. So the average CPU is the percent of the consumption over the last 60 seconds. Notice it does actually give you that time there. And again, that's what all of these are showing us over here, all the graphs on the right. Now on the graphs on this one, notice we do have our CPU total, we have our service CPU usage, and then we have CPU 0 through 11. All right. Now remember, I have 12 CPUs, and you may be going, why is there only 11 of them there? The keen-eyed among you will notice that I said we're starting with CPU 0. We don't start at 1, we start at 0. So that's why we are 1 short. So just something to kind of be aware of. So you can search for associated handles by using that. But those types of things. Now, one nice thing is if you do have something that is suspended or are running and you're like, what is that? You can right click on it and say search online, which is really nice. You don't have to then just go to Google and type in what is this. You can just right click on that and be good to go, which makes your life a little bit easier. Now this is using Microsoft Bing search. It is not using Google Chrome. I'm in Chrome right now, but it's still using Bing search because, well, it's Windows, and of course they're gonna highly encourage you to use their search part. So just something to be thinking of. You can come down and you can see everything else here. You got SMSS and Spotify, and you can be like, okay, what's this? Again, just do a search online, pops it up, and then of course you have to use your abilities of detection to determine which item that you actually care about reading about. Which link is it that's going to give you the actual information? So please be a bit careful on that aspect. So very nice that we can do our search there. If we go to the memory tab, all right, we have lots of stuff going across the top. So we still have our processes list. If you notice, that kind of continues through every section. They're all called slightly different, but it does continue from every section. All right. So if we go ahead and, if you have something checked, it does show up at the top, which is why Zoom is staying there. If I even know I changed Zoom, I'm like, what's going on here? So if I undo that, it will go away. Anyway, our memory tab, all right. The physical memory graph at the bottom, really nice to have. So we do have 5 different sections here. So notice we have a hardware reserved of 65 megabytes. This is for things like your BIOS and what types of hardware you have on your computer, those types of things. From my understanding, traditionally this is going to be less than 70 megabytes on a normal computer. However, it could range up to a few hundred, and that is still completely normal now. If you have a whole lot more than that, maybe you want to take a look into what's going on and why that's there. A little bit of Googling would probably be helpful there. Now, in use, we have, this is what's actually being used by our computer at that exact moment in time. Notice we also have standby, and you might be going, wow, Windows is using all but 428 megabytes of the RAM on its computer. What is going on with that? Well, that free section, there's overall more than that, and that's free. And overall, the thought nowadays with RAM is the more that you can have at the ready for the user, the better the experience is going to be. So the standby may be applications that are open. Maybe you have like some tabs in Chrome that you've closed out of, but Windows hasn't kicked to the bucket yet because they're like, well, maybe they're going to want to open that back up, or those types of ideas. Same thing with software, those types of things. So that standby is being used, quote unquote, like it's there waiting for you if necessary. It can throw out some of that standby and grab something else, but it's not necessarily actively truly being accessed. So if we can go ahead, let's just open up again some of my heavier applications here. Notice that we were at like 6,900. Now we're up to 75. And you'll notice that my standby is slowly shrinking. So AutoCAD has opened, and AutoCAD was probably actually in that standby RAM because remember I did have that open a few minutes ago. All right, and now we're opening Inventor up, so we just keep getting bigger and bigger with these documents. We do have OBS already open, Chrome is already open. Let's go ahead and add Word to that list. Oh, actually Word is already open. Let's go ahead and add an Excel to that list. Let's just keep bringing more and more of my RAM into use. And you can just keep seeing how the in-use is changing and standby is changing. So, and my free is almost non-existent now. So instead of throwing things out of standby, they said, oh, there's some free, we'll go ahead and grab that instead. So kind of interesting. Now, this hard fault, this column is actually kind of interesting. All right, we've got 615.9, and you're going faults. There's faults on your computers? That's not a good thing. And yes, a fault on your computer is not truly a good thing. However, it's not actually what it sounds like. So a hard fault is an instance where Windows ran out of space in RAM and had to use the swap file. The swap file, if you don't know what this is, or sometimes it's called the page file, is a location on your hard drive where data from RAM is stored when there's not enough space in RAM for all of the data. So this is stuff that's happening in the background that's like Windows doesn't put a high priority on. It's going, okay, well, it may be not being a priority on, or it may be like you only have 10 gigs of RAM, or 6 gigs, well, even worse, 4 gigs of RAM on Windows, and as you can see here, I'm using 8. So if I only had 4 gigs of RAM in this computer, this standby would not be non-existent, or all of that would be on a page file on my hard drive. Now, in theory, with SSDs coming pretty much common these days, or being everywhere, that page file is still going to be a lot quicker than if you had an old traditional mechanical drive where it was being stored. So that is something that you do need to take into account. But overall, those hard faults aren't the end of the world. If you notice, I had a spike over here, it seems, of something. I don't even know why your phone is running, so I wish we could go ahead. Oh, it's already suspended, yet it's causing a hard fault, which is kind of interesting. This is one of those things where it's like, I don't want this installed on my computer, but it's kind of stuck there. So, if you're constantly having hard faults, or those types of things, or you look at your pages file size, that will be one great way to tell you, are you using all of the memory in your computer that you possibly have. So just something to be aware of when it comes to those hard faults. They're important to keep your eye on, but it's not the end of the world if you do have them. All right. And if we do know it again, this is again in the past minute. So overall, my hard faults, there we go. They're just disappearing now because a minute ago is when we had those. As I said, if you see a lot of hard faults, good indication you need more RAM for your computer. Overall today, as you can see, my computer, 8 gigs to me, minimum amount of RAM you should have on any computer nowadays, at least any new computer you buy, and I'd suggest at least 16. Many people are actually saying 32 is the better way to go anymore, but I think 16 is still plenty, and that's what I'm running. And as you can see, I've got a lot of standby memory being used, but not like, absolutely used by all the programs that I'm having. But if you're doing a lot more physically intense things, maybe a higher memory usage for you would be an important thing. So maybe 32 gigs would be important. You can still look at your network as well. You can see I have TCP, my Ethernet. You can see Wi-Fi. I have other Ethernet, Bluetooth. So it is telling you where your data is being used. And let us just for fun go ahead and copy that file. Nope. I have to go back and grab it again. Copy, and I put that in this folder, So I'm going to go ahead and put that there again, and you can see my Ethernet data is spiking because that is what I'm using, and you can see my Wi-Fi isn't doing anything because it's going, yeah, Ethernet is fast enough. Now, don't always trust. Remember, this window, it's only saying 105, and you're like, you have a 1 gigabit connection. Well, remember, this is bytes, not bits. So over here, we're looking at the bits. So you have to remember to keep those two things separate, bytes versus bits. All right, so that's kind of a quick, brief overview of the Resource Manager. Remember, you can right-click and do Search Online. That will be very helpful for you when you're trying to figure out what something is on your computer and you're like, what is this? Why is this running? So here's my ACAD one. Let's go ahead and do a quick search. And you can see that it's talking about AutoCAD. Well, you guys, obviously down here it's showing you the AutoCAD images and things like that. So a little bit of give and take there. And that's going to end it for Resource Monitor, and we'll have one more video on the last topic.